is already Chodesh Adar. 2 years ago, I think I gave a shir here, or was it elsewhere in Beit Shemesh? 2 years ago it was here, and we spoke about Simcha and different concepts of Simcha, and I don't remember how many I mentioned then. I think there are some new additions which we'll speak about in the future. And in Minchas Osher Klolei HaMitzvos, there's a siman about Simcha, and I think there is an update in Minchas Osher Parshas Kisavoi, the new Minchas Osher that just came out recently on Chamisha Chum Shetorah, the new edition, and I think there's an update on Simcha. But today we will speak about a specific mitzvah of Purim. Mishloach Manos ish l're'ehu u'Matanos le'evyonim. So the Trumas Adeshen, Kuf Yud Aleph, says that Mishloach Manos, the reasoning, the rationale of the mitzvah, which is a mitzvah that Rabbanan is to ensure that each and every one of us has food for Sudas Purim. And that is why Mishloach Manos, you could only be Makayim with food or drinks. People might be happier to get jewelry or other gifts or furniture, but that is not the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos ish l're'ehu. It is only food or drinks, and that proves that this mitzvah is associated with Sudas Purim. Tichsam Sofer Tshuvas Orach Chaim Kuf Tzadik Vav quotes Manos HaLevi. Manos HaLevi is a magnificent sefer on Megillas Esther, composed by Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, who was one of the great Mekubalim in Tzfas in the days of the Beis Yosef. And a Perek Tes in Megillas Esther, he says that Mishloach Manos is about Achvo V'Reus, enhancing, encouraging brotherhood, love amongst people, and Achdus. And he says this idea on the posuk when Haman says Yeshnoi Am Echod Mefuzar Umefoirod. So we lack Achdus. We always lack Achdus. Probably somewhere it seeped into our DNA. It shouldn't have been there lechatchila, but that's the way we are. So Keneged Yeshnoi Am Echod Mefuzar Umefoirod, Chazal were metaken Mishloach Manos to enhance love and caring and compassion, achvo v'reus. And the Chassam Sofer seems to assume that these are two different reasons, and it's a machlokes. What is Mishloach Manos all about? And the Chassam Sofer goes on to explain a psak of the Ramon Tov Reish Tzadik Kei Siv Daled. The Ramon writes, Misha Sholach Manos l'chaveiroi, v'ploini, the recipient, Einoi roitze lekablom, he is yoitze yedei chayva. I sent. Well, the recipient, the other party, refused to accept my Mishloach Manos. Still, I was yoitze. And the Chassam Sofer says, according to the Tumas Adeshen, doesn't make sense, because I achieved nothing. You actually didn't do anything, because what you sent comes back to the sender. So you gave no one what to eat on Purim. But according to the Manos HaLevi, the Ramah makes sense. I sent, and the recipient knows that I sent, and probably he will appreciate, and therefore I achieved my goal. The fact that he sent it back isn't relevant, because the point and the rationale of the mitzvah is people should care about others, think about others, send to others, and therefore you achieve the goal and the motive of the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. That is the interpretation of the Chassam Sofer. The Ksav Sofer, the great son of his father, the Chassam Sofer, Orach Chaim Siman Kuf Mem Aleph, gives us another nafka min halacha between the two reasons, two explanations of the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. Person sent Mishloach Manos to another, and the recipient doesn't know who the sender is. Was he Yoitza or he was not Yoitza? So the Ksav Sofer says, according to the Tumas Adeshen, he was Yoitza. Because why would it make a difference who sent? I am responsible that another person has food, and therefore whether he knows who the sender is doesn't really make a difference. But according to the Manos Halevi, that the entire idea is to enhance appreciation and achva, v'reis, and friendship. If he doesn't know who send, I achieve no goal. So both the Chsam Sofer and the Ksav Sofer assume this is a machlokes, two different opinions. So just regarding the Ksav Sofer, in Hilchas Tzedakah, the greatest mitzvah is Matan B'Seiso. If the recipient doesn't know who the sender is, that tops the list. So according to the Ksav Sofer, that would be correct regarding mitzvah tzedakah, but not necessarily regarding Mishloach Manos. My feeling would be if he doesn't know who sent, then that is really the mitzvah min hamufchar, because every other person he'll meet, he say, maybe this is the one that sent me that beautiful basket, and maybe we'll be enhancing more achva and more reis than if he would know who is the sender. If he doesn't know who the sender is, he might be more appreciative and smile to many more people. But anyway, the common denominator, tzad hashava, shebein achsam sofer v'aksav sofer, is two different reasons, two different opinions. And I think, to me, it is very hard, B'chal, to accept this entire rationale and this entire approach. And I think if somebody would meet Reb Shlomo Alkabetz in Tzvat, and he would say to him, regarding your machlokes with the Trumas Hadesh and what Mishloach Manos is about, Reb Shlomo Alkabetz will be taken aback and he'll say, you're out of your mind. I have a machlokes with the Trumas Hadesh. You're crazy. You're insane. The Trumas Hadesh was a great posek. I'm a poet. I'm a Kabbalist. I'm not a posek. It would never occur to me to have a machlokes with the Trumas Hadesh. What are you talking about? Manos Halevi is a Sefer Drush. And Yeshnoi Am Echod Mefuzer Mefoirod, Haman wasn't exactly complaining that Yidden lack Achdus. That was not what Haman had in mind. What does he mean when he says Yeshnoi Am Echod Mefuzer Mefoirod? One pshat is in the Gemara, and the other pshat is my own feeling. I'll start with my feelings, because if I quote the Gemara, it doesn't make sense to say another pshat. So, I assume nobody here read the protocols of the elders of Zion, Yemach Shemam V'Zichram, but the anti-Semites, in every generation, different versions, different formulas, different words, but they always said the same. The Jews are everywhere. They control everything behind the scenes, like an octopus with 10,000 tentacles. They control the media, they control finance, they control public opinion, and Haman tells Achashverosh, they're everywhere, behind the scenes, under the radar. That is what all the anti-Semites said in every generation. They say that today as well. And Haman was Rosh Verishon of the anti-Semites. He was the only predecessor of Hitler, that actually had in mind to annihilate and destroy the entire Jewish people. That's my pshat in Yeshnoi Am Echod Mefuzer Mefoirod. But the Gemara Megillah Daf Yud Gimel offers another pshat. When Haman comes to Achashverosh to suggest killing, destroying, annihilating the entire Jewish people, Achashverosh said, Krocha ato oise b'malchusi. When you destroy an entire people, there will be a terrible void. This is going to create a void in society. And Haman says, no void. They're not productive. They don't help. They're not a progressive people. They just keep us back. And a mefuzar, a mefoirod, they don't live in one place. So we could destroy them without paying any price in the social well-being of our communities, of our states. That is the pshat the Gemara says in Daf Yud Gimel. But the last thing Haman is complaining about is the lack of achdus between Jews. And therefore, the pshat of Manos Halevi is entirely drash. It would never occur to the Manos Halevi to have a machlokes with Trumas Hadesh. And actually, the Trumas Hadesh is not Trumas Hadesh, it's the Rambam. And the Rambam clearly says in Perik Beis and Hilchas Megillah that Mishloach Manos could only be food. It is clear in the Rambam. So the Trumas Hadeshen actually is not a big mechadish. He's just explaining a simple halacha why Mishloach Manos must be either food and drinks. And that's the Rambam. So the Manos Halevi has a machlokes with Trumas Hadeshen. He actually has a machlokes with the Rambam. And the Rambam is the Gemara. And it is clear in the Gemara, both in Megillah Daf Zayin and above Metzia Daf Ayin Ches, that Mishloach Manos is all about food. So in Megillah Daf Zayin we have a few stories about Mishloach Manos that the Amirom sent to each other. What did they send? Meat, wine, divrei metika, tavlinim, all they sent, and all the stories we have is food. And in Bava Metzia Ayin Ches, we learn that we shecht animals for Sudas Purim, and that is the basis of Mishloach Manos. The Rambam, in the same halacha, the Rambam starts off, Keitzad mitzvah seuda zu, and Perik Beis of Hilchas Megillah. And as you probably know, Hilchas Megillah and Chanukah are the very last halachas in Sefer Azmanim, Rambam, and the Rambam starts off in the same halacha. Perik Beis, halacha tezvav, Keitzad choyve seuda zu, sheyoichel basar, v'yataken seuda noah, kefi asher timtze yodoi, v'shoyse yayin ad sheyishtakeh v'yiradem b'shikrut, v'chein chayev odem l'shloach shtei monos shel basar, or shnei minei tafshel, shnei minei oichlin l'chaveiroi, v'chein. So the Rambam includes Mishloach Manos together with Sudas Purim, and he clearly says, you send food. So the Trumas Hadeshen is Rambam. The Rambam is Gemara. So to me, it is so simple. There are no two different Ta'amim. There is no machlokes regarding the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. And that is why I have difficulty with the Chsam Sofer, but I have no difficulty with accepting the Ksav Sofer. And let me explain why. The Chsam Sofer explains a halacha psuka and a kula according to Manos Halevi. And that is the Ramah. The Ksav Sofer is Mechadish a Chumra according to the Manos Halevi. That is acceptable. So the way I see it, the Manos Halevi and the Trumas Hadeshen are not a machlokes, but the Manos Halevi bears importance. He was a Gadol B'Yisrael. He was one of the great Mekabalim. His most famous composition is L'Chodoidi. And even during his lifetime, I'm not a historian, but I think B'Kol Kehilas Yisrael, we say L'Chodoidi B'Kabbalah Shabbos. So I don't mean to belittle what he writes in Manos Halevi, but it's the Manos Halevi on top of the Trumas Hadeshen, not instead of the Trumas Hadeshen. There is no machlokes. It is clear from Chazal, following Chazal the Rambam, up to the Trumas Hadeshen, Mitzvah Mishloach Manos is primarily about Sudas Purim. But the Manos Halevi has a point when he says it is also about Achva V'Reyes. So the reason we need to send Mishloach Manos is to do our best to ensure that everybody has what to eat, but you need to send it in a way, in a fashion, that will also enhance Achdus, Achva V'Reyes. So to say that the psak of the Ramah, Hashalech Manos L'Chaveiro V'Yein Roitze L'Kablam, is based on the Manos Halevi, but it doesn't make sense according to Trumas Hadeshen, to me, that is unacceptable. Because the Trumas Hadeshen is the basis. The Trumas Hadeshen is not a matter of dispute, it's not a matter of doubt. The Trumas Hadeshen is Aleph Beis, and everybody agrees to the Trumas Hadeshen. The Ksav Sofer offers a Chumra according to the Manos Halevi, which means you sent Mishloach Manos, and the other party got what you sent. So you did enhance someone's Sudas Purim. But you need also to be Mekayim the Manos Halevi. And the way you send Mishloach Manos should be enhancing Achdus, appreciation, and Simcha. Many years ago, I was a younger man living in Kiryat Sanz, and I sent with my little boy. I only have a Ben Yochid, Baruch Hashem. I have 6 daughters and many, many Eneklach, grandchildren and granddaughters, and Ur Eneklach. I came a few minutes late to the Shia because I was at a halakha of one great-grandchild of mine tonight. So Baruch Hashem, we have simchas in the family, Koyit and Hashem v'Koy Yosef. So many years ago, I sent Mishloach Manos with my son to 2 neighbors. One was a Rosh Hashiva, and I sent him, I think it was Minchas Osham Bavakama, the first Minchas Osham that came out. It was Tovshin Mem Vav, many years ago, almost 40 years ago. I was a young man once upon a time. And to the other neighbor, he had 2 little kids. I sent Mishloach Manos with 2 little dolls and 2 gragers, Rashanim. And I meet the Rosh Hashiva at Mincha, and he says, thank you for the Mishloach Manos. I assume the 2 gragers were for me and the Rebbetzin, he asks me. So I understood that something went wrong. Moed shel Tzedok and Eschalfuli b'Moed shel Purim. And my son got confused between the 2 Mishloach Manos. I just wondered what the other guy did with the Minchas Osher. But was I Mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos? Probably yes. I think both of them enjoyed it, and the Rosh Hashiva took it in a good humor. So the Ksav Sofer is Mechadesh Chumra, and that is acceptable to me, because I think we should put the Manos HaLevi on top of the Trumas Adeshen. But to explain the Ramah, according to the Manos HaLevi, doesn't make sense, especially how strange it would be that the Ramah rejects Trumas Adeshen for Manos HaLevi. Trumas Adeshen is Avi Minhagei Ashkenaz. And most of Divrei Haramon Shulchan Aruch are based either on the Maharil or on Trumas Adeshen. They are the fathers of Minhagei Ashkenaz. And the Trumas Adeshen is a Torah l'roishoi shel Ramo b'darka Moshe b'kol mokim v'mokim. I doubt that Ramo ever heard of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. They were contemporaries. The Ramo in Krakow and Poland, the Manos HaLevi in Tzvat in Eretz Yisrael. I doubt that Ramo ever saw the Manos HaLevi or even heard about him. And even if he would, how strange it would be that he accepts the opinion of a Sephardi Kabbalist, his contemporary, and he goes against the Trumas Adeshen, who was 200 years before them both, and he's one of the greatest poskim in Ashkenaz, and especially Minhagei Ashkenaz, and therefore, I think we need a different interpretation of the Ramah, v'lo k'divrei Aksav Sofer. There might be other nafkaminas between the 2 reasonings, and many achronim, for some reason, assumed that there is really 2 different tamim, and an nafkamin halacha. So the Ben Ish Chai in Shalas Tshuvas Torah Lishma, which is also a story, a very interesting story. Torah Lishma is authored according to the Daf Hashar by Yecheskel Kachali. And nobody knows did he ever exist. Yecheskel Kachali, we know that it is a sefer from Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, the Ben Ish Chai. It's a mystery why he didn't sign his name, as he did in all his other sforim, and why he published this sefer with another name. We don't know. But we do know that Torah Lishma is a sefer from the Ben Ish Chai. And he discusses a question, could you send Mishloach Manos before Purim? And sometimes we have a problem. Purim is a very short day, and some people would prefer send Mishloach Manos before Purim. I get many Mishloach Manos before Purim, but I assume that people don't really have the intention to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos by sending me, but rather, you want to express appreciation, or Kvod Torah, so we get some Mishloach Manos. So the Ben Ish Chai deals with the question, could you send before Purim, on a stipulation that the person should eat up everything you sent him before Purim. So he says, according to the Tumas edition, it's okay. According to the Manos Levi, not. Because the moment he received it, okay, he already appreciates. Why would he forget 2 days later? I don't know. In my opinion, this halacha doesn't depend at all what is the reasoning. And sometimes the details of a mitzvah transcend the reasoning, the rationale of the mitzvah. After all, the mitzvah is Mishloach Manos ish l'reyehu, and that is a mitzvah of Yom HaPurim. And in my opinion, bein l'shittas Tumas Hadeshen, bein l'shittas Manos Levi, you must send on Purim. And if you send it before Purim, you will not mekayim the mitzvah. On the other hand, it is almost impossible today to be mekayim the mitzvah Mishloach Manos in the way Mordechai ve'Esther, Anshe Knesset Agdola, and Chazal envisioned this mitzvah. So the Rambam writes, you need to send Shnei Mine Basar, Shnei Tavshilin, wine. It is obvious that you need to send something that the other party will use for Sudas Purim. We live in an age of abundance. This is the age of plenty. Ki lo yechdal evyon mekerev haaretz. And to our dismay, in every community, there are far more have-nots than haves. And there are far more people that need support than the ones that could support them. Ki lo yechdal evyon mekerev haaretz. But the poor today are not like the poor of yore, of yesterday and previous generations. And you assume that everybody has Seudas Purim. And usually people send cookies and sweets and packed goods. And it is very wise, because if everybody is going to send meat and fish and chales, all this stuff will be thrown out in 2 or 3 days. So on one hand, you're mekayim the mitzvah with any food and any drinks, even though it's quite sure this will not be part of Sudas Purim. But Baruch Hashem, there aren't that many people that don't have Sudas Purim. So I always have a few families that I know, will eat Sudas Purim, what we send. And there are some people that send us the same. But the vast majority of people, it is just not practical. It's impossible. So I just want to make the point, halacha l'maaseh is not always dictated by the reasoning and the idea that is at the origin of different mitzvahs. So originally, mitzvah Sudas Purim is to ensure that everybody has what to eat on Purim. It is impossible today. But the halacha that it needs to be food or drinks, that doesn't change. That will be forever. So Chazal didn't stipulate that you need to send Sudas Purim. But it is clear in halacha, from the Gemara to Rambam, to Tumas Hadeshen, to the Shulchan Aruch, must be food or drinks. So if you then the sefer, maybe you're going to make a person very happy, or money, you're not mekayim the mitzvah Mishloach Manos. Even though very few people actually are mekayim the original idea of Mishloach Manos, which is part of Sudas Purim. So once again, as I said, I don't think there's a machlokes. Everybody agrees it is about Sudas Purim, but I am happy to accept the Manos Levi as well. And it is also to enhance, to encourage Achdus amongst Klal Yisrael. So, the Ben Ish Chai is Mechadesh Chumrah, according to the Manos Levi. And once again, like the Chsav Sofer, I could accept that. But the Chsav Sofer is Mechadesh Ekula, the Psak of the Ramah based on Manos Levi, and that במחילה כבוד תירוסי, עופר ואיפר אני, תחת כפות רגליו שלך some sofer. But to me, that doesn't make sense on many levels. Because first of all, I don't think there's a machlokes. It cannot be a machlokes. And everybody agrees with the fundamental idea of the Tumas edition, which is the Rambam, which is the Gemara. It's about food and how unreasonable it is to interpret the psak of the Ramah, not in accordance to the Tumas edition, but in accordance to the Manos Halevi. So the Bach is the very first one on Tofrei Tzadikei to say that Mishloach Manos is about Achdus and Reus. But the Bach is not Halacha L'Maaseh, and the Bach explains those that are showing him Rashi and others that say Rabbonon Machlefes Sudesayu, they actually swapped their meals. So nobody enhanced Sudes Purim. And Rashi says 1 year Reuven avayt Shimon, and the next year Shimon will avayt Reuven, and both were Mekayim the mitzvah Mishloach Manos, and all the other Rishonim ask, so one where Reuven is Mekayim the mitzvah, Shimon the other year, how would the recipient or the guest that was invited to the meal, how is he Mekayim the mitzvah? And the Bach says, it's about Achva V'Reyes. Both the host and the guest are part of the mitzvah. Just coming together, one family with the other, that is the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, and both parties, both the guest and the host, are Mekayim the mitzvah. But we don't paskin that pshat. But the Bach is the very first to explain, at least a certain shitta. It is about Achva V'Reus, and therefore the Manos Halevi is not only an idea expressed by a Mekubal and a poet, a Mishayrer, but also one of the greatest poskim, even though it's not Halacha L'Maaseh. And therefore I say, we need to add the Manos Halevi on top of the Tumas edition, and not instead. And therefore, if you want to be Mechadash Chumra according to the Tumas edition, according to Manos Halevi, that might be acceptable, but not a Kula. So how do we understand the Ramah? The Ramah is a totally different shitta. Let us analyze the lashon of the Ramah. Hashaleach Manos lechaveroi, v'hu einoi roitze lekablom, o shemoichel loi, yotzi yedei chavosoi. What does the Ramah mean with this dual language? Einoi roitze lekablom, oi shemoichel loi. The concept of mechila is a legal concept. It actually belongs in Choshe Mishpat. I don't know how to translate mechila into English. Forgiving. So one person hurt the other's feeling, we use the expression forgiving. But when you want to be meichel alone, what expression would you need? Forgoing, or what is it? Wave.
Forgive it.
So, mechila is a concept that doesn't apply to Mishloach Manos. It's not a chiyuv. So what do you mean moichel? In Choshe Mishpat, Adam yachol lemchol shiabud, v'yachol lemchol chov, u'lo yachol lemchol matana. So if Reuven wants to give a gift to Shimon, a Matanos levyonim is a gift. It is defined by Chazal as Matanos. It's a matana. There is no mechila by Matanos. So obviously, what the Ramah has in mind is not a legal concept of mechila, but a practical one. So why is it different than Einoi roitze lekablam? The way I understand it, and I think it's poshut. To some, might seem to be a big chiddush, but I see no other way, no other interpretation. There are two different scenarios, two different possibilities in which Reuven sends a gift to Shimon and Shimon sends it back. One is the preferable one. Shimon tells Reuven, I so much appreciate the mere fact that you thought about me and you sent me this beautiful basket. I am well-to-do, and I know that you are not. Hareini ki'ilu itkabalti, and I really mean it. I so much appreciate But I got 20 baskets like this today. And I'm alone at home. So please take it back. And I'm sure that your kids will have a great time. That is one scenario, which is a preferable one. Sometimes in the course of human relations, there might be a sadder situation. Reuven sends Mishloach Manos to Shimon, and Shimon says, don't pretend to be my friend because I know you're not. So, shkilu tivusach v'shadi achizre, that is an expression that we find in Chazal. Don't pretend to be my friend. You know, you ruined my business deal a month ago. You spoke lashon hara about me 3 months ago and don't think I didn't hear about it. So go to, I don't want to use the next word. He says, I don't want anything to do with you, and send it to your friends and not to me. I don't want to be associated with you in any way. That is a sadder version. So the Manos says, he doesn't want to accept what you send. Oy shemoichel. Moichel means hareini keilu iskabalti, and that is the lashon that Mishnah Bruder uses on that sif. So Einay Roitzel Kabla means I don't want your gift. Send it to someone else and not to me. We are not friends, and don't pretend to be my friend. Oy shemoichel, and he says hareinu keilu iskabalti. I very much appreciate it. So in the second case, the interpretation of the Chassam Sofer might make sense. I achieved my goal. I made him happy. I enhanced Achdus. But in the first case, you just made matters worse. So how was he Mekayim the mitzvah? According, not only the Thomas Hadeshim, but according to the Manos Halevi as well. And therefore I think the Ramah demands a totally different assumption. And Pshat in the Ramah is very poshut. Ma de mifkadis iboyalach lemevad. I sent. It is not within my power to see to it that others are willing to accept. Chazal mechayev nishloach Manos ish l're'eyu. I sent Mishloach Manos in good faith. It's not that I sent to an address knowing that no one is home. Somebody opened the door. It is not within my power to see to it that he gets what I send and is willing to accept. And therefore, you were yoytze yedei chayvos. Because Chazal did not require more than that. You need to send, I sent. I'm disappointed that Ploni Almoni didn't want to accept what I sent. Whatever the reason is, I would prefer that he takes what I send. But as long as you send, that is your chiyuv. Nothing beyond that. The nafka mina between my interpretation and the Chassam Sofer would be aloha lamaisa. Yotzi yedei chayvosoi. But is it a mitzvah min hamifcha to send to another person? According to my understanding, yes. And this brings us to a big chiddush I wrote in one of my sforim, and I don't even remember where. And I apologize. After writing 35 sforim, and if you count the new Chamishuchim Shetoyer as a new one, which it is, then the number is 40 sforim, not 35. In my age, you get a bit confused what you wrote where. But I think a few places in my sforim, and it might be Minchas Osha Moedem Chelak Aleph and Yom Kippur, it just might be, or maybe in the Shalosh Teshuvos that weren't printed yet. Right now I'm working on Chelak Daled. I wrote a tshuva about wearing sneakers on Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. Comfortable sneakers, comfortable shoes. They're not or. In Halacha, it is only shoes that have leather that are prohibited. But once upon a time, if your shoes weren't leather, you felt the pedals on the street, and that's what it's all about. After all, Neilas Sandal is one of the Chameshes Inuyim. And the most comfortable shoes available today on the market are, sneakers, running shoes. I don't know how they're defined in modern language, nalei sport. So I say it's not an avera. Because halacha says what is prohibited is nalei or. And this goes back to what I mentioned a few minutes before. Not always is the rationale dictates all the details. But I have a few rayas from the Rambam and other sources that lechatchila one should be makayim not only the mitzvahs but also the rationale of the mitzvahs. Perik Chov Daled El Shabbos, when the Rambam explains muktzah, why did Chazal prohibit tiltul muktzah? The Rambam writes 3 different reasons. The first one is Batal tam she'amr Torah leman yanuach. Because Chazal prohibited tiltul muktzah because Shabbos, people will be bored. They don't go to work. And they look for something to do. Hard for me to understand how would people be bored on Shabbos. Shabbos is my Chazorah day. In the middle of the week, I'm busy writing, busy giving shiurim. Most of what I chaza and learn is Shabbos. I'm never bored on Shabbos. But some people might be, the Rambam writes, and they'll be busy moving things around the house. You know, putting the dining room furniture into the living room and turning the living room into the dining room, emptying out the fridge, and doing all kind of different things. V'nimtza botel tam she'omr Torah leman yanuach. Leman yanuach is not a mitzvah. But the Torah gives us Shabbos leman yanuach. What we learn from this Rambam is, it's not enough to perform the mitzvahs. You also need to achieve the rationale of mitzvahs. And therefore, if you're wearing your most comfortable shoes you have at home on Yom Kippur, botel tam she'omr Torah ve'nisam es nafsho yiseichem. So, it's not allowed. It's not even in a Siddur Rabbanon. But botel tam she'omr Torah. So according to my understanding of the Ramah, you were Yoitza. You sent. But you achieved no goal. Neither Manos Alevi nor Trumas Adeshen. So it definitely would be a Midas Chasidus. Try again. Let's just hope somebody in town will be willing to accept your Mishloach Manos. If nobody will be willing, either you live in an extraordinary town where everybody is wealthy and everybody loves you and nobody wants to take your Mishloach Manos, or you might have another problem and deal with it after Purim. So the way I understand it, Amor, you are Yoitza. I sent. I have no chiyuv to go beyond that, but definitely would be a midas chasidus. Try to achieve tam she'amru chachamim v'nishloach manos. Achieve the goal that this mitzvah is all about. According to some Soiva's understanding, the Ramo Paskins, according to the Manos Alevi, it's about achva v'reyes. I achieved my goal and that's it. So that would be the nafkamina between my understanding and the understanding of the Chassam Soifa. So let's just again wrap things up. 2 different reasons that we find. 3 nafkaminas la'alocha that we find in achronim between the 2 different reasons. And in my opinion, there are no 2 reasons. Maybe 1.5. It is all about Sudas Purim, as we see in Rambam. 2 counts in Rambam. It is obvious in Rambam that Mishloach Manos is associated with Sudas Purim. It's in the same halacha. V'chein chayiv l'shloach shnei monos. That is part of Sudas Purim, and that is why it needs to be food. But I do think the Manos Alevi is important. He was a great Godel and a great tzaddik, especially if he also supported by the Bach, even though the Bach is not halacha l'maisa, and therefore I think we should put the Manos Alevi on top of the Trumas Adeshen. So Mishloach Manos is about Sudas Purim, but not only about Sudas Purim, but also about Achva V'Reyos. And what is Matanos Levyonim all about? So this would necessitate another hour, which we don't really have right now. But in Minchas Osher Moedim Chelik Beis, and we have some of the Svarim available outside. I wrote Ba'arichus not only about Mishloach Manos and about Matanos Lavyonim as well. And the way I understand it, Matanos Lavyonim and Mishloach Manos are two sides of the very same coin. And Matanos Lavyonim is obviously tzedakah. Whenever you give anything to an oni, it is tzedakah. But why does one need to give tzedakah on Purim? We understand why one needs to give tzedakah seret yemei tshuva. Tshuva tefillah v'tzedakah mavir nesroy agzero. What's the inyan to give tzedakah on Purim? And I brought from many rishonim. Matanos Lavyonim is also about Simchas Purim, the same as Mishloach Manos. So why is Mishloach Manos food and Matanos Lavyonim money? I think the reason is very simple. When you're sending to people that have, but you want them to have more, send food. If you're sending to people that might not have, you don't know what they are lacking, send them money. Let them decide what they need. You're going to send hummus, but maybe he doesn't have challah, doesn't have bread. So what is he going to do with the hummus? You're going to send chrein, but maybe he doesn't have fish. So do you expect him to eat soup with chrein or chont with hummus? Doesn't go together. So when you send to an oni and an evyoin, it would be wisest send them money. You're yoitza with food, but money is the lechatchila. When you send to people that probably have the basics, the fundamentals, send them anything. Let them have more. Maybe your fish will be more appealing to them than their fish. Other people's fish are usually more appealing than your own. So, but fundamentally, the Rishonim say, Ein medaktekim b'mois Purim. You're yoitzi even though you sent to a person that's not an oni at all. Ein medaktekim. The Ramban, the Ritva, the Rishonim explain, Sheyiu hakol semechim. Sheyiu hakol semechim. So one of the great Gedolim of our time wrote in his Sefer that you need to send to an evyoin. An oni is not enough. And the Gemara in Bava Metzia differentiates between an oni and an evyoin. An evyoin is the person that is so bad off, he has really nothing, and he reached a stage in which he is no longer embarrassed to ask for money. So the mitzvah is Matanos Lavyonim. And I wrote in my Sefer, we don't learn halacha from Megillas Esther. Megillas Esther is a very important Sefer, but it's not a halachic source. We learn halacha from the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. Neither the Rambam nor the Shulchan Aruch don't write evyon. And they write the mitzvah is to give to two aniyim. That's the lashon of the Rambam, the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. We don't paskin from Megillas Esther. Megillas Esther is not a halachic source. Many times I teach my Talmidim, we don't know how to learn Mikra. We need to try to understand how the Tanoim learned Tanakh, how the Marom learned the Mishnah, how the Rishonim learned the Gemara. We don't paskin from Psukim. So Megillas Esther is where it all begins. But the halachas we learn from Rambam, Tur, and Shulchan Aruch. None of the three mentions that you need to give Levyonim. You need to give Lanui. So obviously you don't need an Evyon. Lechatchila, you need to send to Aniyim. But if you got it wrong, you are still Yoitze the mitzvah. And that is why the Gemara says, in Bavli it's not a Megillah. Rather in Bava Metzia and Ches. In Yerushalmi it is in Megillah. Ein medagtekin. Kol ha-poishet yad noisnem loi. Sheyiu hakol samech. So Matanos Lavyonim means try to give to Aniyim. But even if you gave, and the recipient is not an Oni, you were still Mekayim the mitzvah. So Mishloach, Manos, and Matanos Lavyonim are both about Simchas Purim. And we very much hope that Matanos Lavyonim that we give is not about Simchas Purim. We very much hope so. We very much hope that the tons of money our community generates, Matanos Lavyonim will keep them going for a few months. We very much hope that the Matanos Lavyonim we give is not really about Sudas Purim. So these mitzvahs have changed, but the fundamentals remain, which means, Mishloach Manos, you need to send food. We hope that most of this food will be consumed before Pesach, because otherwise it needs to be sold. We very much hope that the money we give to Aniyim and Avyonim will keep them going long after Pesach. But originally, both of these mitzvahs were about Simchas Purim, about ensuring that everybody has what to eat and drink on Purim, and nobody is sitting at home with no food on the table. Sheyiu hakol sameichem. In Hilchas Tzedakah, you need to give Tzedakah la'aniyim. I think the only source we find in Halacha in which we need to care not only to supply and care for the fundamentals of Aniyim, but we need to bear responsibility far beyond that and see to it that people are happy, is by Purim. Chesed is fundamental to Yiddishkeit. It is one of the three pillars of the world, as we mentioned in my introductory remarks to today's Shir, Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasodim, Olam Chesed Yibona. Many times I heard from my great Rebbe, from the Kleisenberg Rebbe, a thought in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. So the very first bracha in Tfilas Amidah is Berches Avois. And it is the only bracha in which Kavona is Ma'akev. Minchas Osha and Tfilah, don't look for it, still wasn't published, but I hope someday we'll have separate Minchas Osha and Tfilah. I wrote that the reason Kavona is Ma'akev and Berches Avois, Lefi Pshutam Shel Devarim, it's the first bracha. At least start off with Kavona. If you're Mechavan at the beginning, there is a chance that you'll keep on going. At some stage you might falter, but at least start off with Kavona. But I think it is beyond just the technicality that it's the first bracha. Maybe it is the fundamental bracha. We stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking for all our needs. Who are we? What are we? Are we entitled to expect HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fulfill our needs? So we want to invoke Schus Avos, and Chazdei Avos, and Bris Avos. So in every tefillah we just start by mentioning who we are. We are Zer Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and our great forefathers cared for us, and we care for them, and we try, we do our best. So this bracha is so fundamental when we stand before our Kodesh Baruch Hu. So we start off this bracha by mentioning all three of them, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But the siyum bracha is Mogen Avram, and the Gemara says the Kodesh Baruch Hu promised Avram, B'cha Choismin, Chasimas bracha will be yours. And the Baal Shem Tov said, B'cha Choismin is the end of days. In the end of days, Mashiach will come, and the schus of Titen Chesed la Avram. It is Chesed that will be the Chasima, and that will bring Kates Hayamin. And I mentioned before the Gemara, Ein Yisor Negoran Ele B'schus Tzedakah Shenemar Tzion B'mishpat Poda V'shoveo B'tzedakah. But tzedakah is caring for the needy, for the desperate, for the poor. In Hilchos Yom Tov Perek Vav Halacha Yud Ches, the Rambam writes, and Halacha Yud Zayin, the Rambam defines Simchas Yom Tov. How is Simchas Yom Tov? And Halacha Yud Ches, the Rambam goes into details. Anoshim b'basa v'yayin, noshim b'bigdei tzavaynim, ktanim b'kaloyes v'agoyzim. And then the Rambam goes on and writes, Kishuaychel v'shoysa chayev la'achel leger, liyosam v'la'almono, im shar ha'aniyim ha'umlalim. Aval mi sheno'el daltot chatzero v'ochel v'shoteh hu banav v'ishto, ve'ineno ma'achil v'mashke la'aniyim v'lamorei nefesh, ein zo simches mitzvah, elo simches kreisoi. Unusually harsh language of the Rambam. ועל אלו נאמר זבחיהם כלחם עונים להם כל אוכלב יטעמו כי לחמם לנפשם ושמחה כזו קלונו להם שנאמר וזרעי פרש על פניכם פרש חגיכם. So the Rambam uses very harsh language and I write Simchas Yom Tov is about caring for the aniyim, umlolim and morei hanefesh. But Purim teaches us to go far beyond that. Not only aniyim, Mishloach mones ish l'reyehu. This is about achdus, about reyes, about caring for other people, and not necessarily only for the needy and the desperate. And even Matanos le'evyonim is not only about aniyim, but using the lashon of the Ramban and the Ritva, sheyiu hakol samechim. So both Mishloach Manos and Matanos le'evyonim are not only about tzedakah. Yes, about tzedakah, but not only about tzedakah, but just caring for other people, regardless of who they are, regardless of whether they have or do not have. It is about being together, like the Manos Halevi says, achva v'reus, and seeing to it, sheyiu hakol samechim. And that is the message of Purim. So when Haman wanted to destroy Klal Yisrael, and miraculously we survived without any harm, we need to stick together. So I'm the son of Holocaust survivors. My father and mother were both in Auschwitz, and many times I related some stories about my father and mother from those days. And I'm a Talmud of the Kloiser Rebbe, who lost his wife and 11 children. And many times I heard from them, both from my Rebbe and from my parents. Tavshi and Hay, when it was all over, nobody dreamed the Jews will ever fight each other or ever hate each other. After we saw so much hatred and sinner from others. But, as I said before, it is the way it is. But each and every one of us needs to do his utmost, not only to care for the poor, but to care for everyone. Sheyiu hakol samechim, and to enhance achdus amongst Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Tzalem Volozhin published the Nefesh HaChaim, Reb Chaim Volozhin's monumental work, and probably the most important work just to share the Ashkofa, the Torah, the philosophy of the Gaon of Vilna is the Nefesh HaChaim. The Gaon had many Talmidim, and some of them wrote Sifrei Halacha, like Rabbi Sol Mishklav and others. Some of them wrote Sifrei Kabbalah, like Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chever and others. But the Gaon's philosophy, his attitude, his ashkafa, no sefer is more important than the Nefesh HaChaim. Reb Chaim didn't publish a Sefer during his lifetime, and the Sefer was published by Reb Itzele. And Reb Itzele writes in the introduction to the Sefer an amazing line. He writes, "My great father gave me Musar all my life, that I think too much about myself and I don't think enough about others. And my father said, none of us is here for himself, neither in Gashmias nor even in Ruchnias. We're all here for each other." And this proves a testament to the greatness of Reb Itzele. Let me make this very clear. If anybody would give me this criticism, that I care too much about myself, I would never write it in my Sefer. That would be between me and him, and I'll probably despise him for the rest of my life. And this tzaddik Reb Itzele shared this with the world for all generations to come. Is there any greater testament to his tzidkes and his anova? I don't really believe him, but I must believe. I assume that Reb Itzele, like any other Gadol B'Yisrael, cared about others. But obviously, he didn't live up to his father's great expectations. Every Gadol B'Yisrael cares about others far more than he cares about himself. But Reb Chaim demanded even more. And he said, none of us is here for himself. We are all part of a greater entity and a greater family. V'kol Yisrael arevim zeh lezeh, in Ruchnias and in Gashmias. And that is the message of Mishloach Manos ish l're'eu v'Matanos l'avyonim. Simchas Yom Tov is about tzedakah. Invite guests. And who will those guests be? The Rambam writes, Aniyim umlolim morei nefesh. Purim goes beyond that. Mishloach Manos ish l're'eu. Think about your neighbors, whether they're rich or poor. Think about the poor, whether they really need or maybe not. Shiyu hakol samechem ve'ein medaktinkim b'mois Purim. So there is so much to learn from Purim, but I think this message is central and it is unique about Purim. Shiyu hakol samechem. So we are all here for each other, to care about each other, to think about each other. And many times I share this wonderful story, a Hasidic Maisa about Rav Moshe Leib Mesasov. Rav Moshe Leib Mesasov has said that the essence of Ahavas Reim I learned from a Gentile, from a non-Jew. So before I go on to tell the story, some of you might wonder, is that strange? A disciple of the Noam Elimelech needs to learn anything from a non-Jew? Do you remember a person named Dome ben Esina? He was a non-Jew. And the Gemara Kedusha Lamed Aleph says, Ad hechin kibud ave'em. We learn from Dome ben Esina. We learn from everyone. We learn from everyone and we learn from everything. One of the Yesodis of Baal Shem Tov taught us Talmidim, whatever you see, whatever you hear, whatever you experience comes to teach you. Nothing is coincidence. Everything is hashgacha. Whatever you see, whatever you experience, comes to teach you. So Chazal learned Kibud Avim from Dome ben Esina. So Rav Moshe Leib Mesasov says, I was walking on the street, and I happened to overhear two people, non-Jews, speaking one to another. Mr. A asks Mr. B, do you love me? Mr. B responds, aren't you ashamed to ask? We've been the best friends for 20 years. Of course I love you. Mr. A asks, what hurts me? Mr. B is taken aback and he said, how would I know? Did you tell me? Mr. A asks, did you ask? Do you really care to know? If you care, you would know what hurts me. And if you don't know, how could you say you love me? How do you dare to say you love me if you don't even know what hurts me? do I need to say? Do I need to tell? You should look at my face and feel that something is wrong. Maybe my friend needs help. It is then that I understood the essence, said the Moshe Mesasava. What does it mean? You know your pain, you should know the pain of others. You know your simcha, you should feel the simcha of others, because you and him are one. And none of us is here just for his own sake. We're all here from one another. And that is what Mishloach, Manos, and Matanos are both all about. Yehi Ratzon, that this should be with us all year round and not only in Purim. We should do our utmost, you hakol samechem, to care for each other, to feel each other, and to bring simcha to each other. So Purim is a day in which we rejoice a miracle, and if we skip Al Nisim and Berchas Hamazon, then Amor writes, we pray and we say, Horachamon, Hu Yasalano, Nisim v'Eflois, Kishem Shos Yisrael Avoseinu b'Yom HaMa'im b'Zman Hazeh. And that is how we end today's shir. Horachamon, Hu Yasalano, Nisim v'Eflois, Kishem Shos Yisrael Avoseinu b'Yom HaMa'im b'Zman Hazeh. We should be Zoicha b'Kora b'Yomeinu to see miracles and be as Goyel Tzedek and Binyan Beis Hamikdash b'Mheiro v'Yomeinu. Amen. Have a listige Purim.